site, which is nine Teves, which starts tonight and concludes on Thursday night. Then Friday this week is Asar B'Teves. This is a fast day. So it's unusual that we actually read the Torah and a half Torah on Friday afternoon on Asar B'Teves. Why are we fasting on the 10th of Teves? That's the day when there was a siege that started around Jerusalem. Actually, the 10th of Teves is considered to be such an intense fast that if it would come on Shabbos, we would fast for it, just like we fast on Yom Kippur. All the other fasts, except for Yom Kippur, if they came on Shabbos, we push them off. But Asar B'Teves, also, if it comes on Shabbos, we would fast. It doesn't come on Shabbos, but the commentaries make the point of saying, if it would come on Shabbos, we would fast, because even worse than the destruction of the temple, which was Tisha B'Av, is living in a siege mentality. That's the beginning of the end. When you're living life under siege, you can't live. And this is a very
Which siege was it?
The siege, presumably of the first temple's destruction. But it was all the
That's a Roman siege.
no, not the Romans. The Romans would be
The first temple.
but presumably it was both. Usually they equate both. They say all the things happened in both temples.
Assyrians.
What?
They were Assyrians.
The Babylonians and the Romans. Okay,
I don't remember the Bible. Well, maybe it's.
Nebuchadnezzar sent his general Nebuzaradan. Okay, so now we go to Joseph says to his brothers and to his father's household, Elev agido leparo, va'omra elav, achai ubeit avi asher be'aretz Canaan bo elai. Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's home, let me go up, I will go up, and I'll talk to Pharaoh, and I'll say to him, my brothers in the house of my father that are in the land of Canaan have come to me. Rashi says, Va'od Omero, and I'm going to have a different phrase. I'll say to him, Vanashim roetzon, the men are shepherds. Meaning to say, Joseph has to manipulate the situation to his advantage. That he has to talk to Pharaoh in a way that Pharaoh will be sensitive and sympathetic to Joseph's requests. This makes it sound like Joseph is not as powerful as he pretended he was. He's not the ruler in all of Egypt. Remember, his father said, they said, your son is the ruler. It's like Jackie Mason says, no Jewish mother thinks, no Jewish mother is willing to think that her son is like the number two. Like the son is a truck driver. The mother says, my son is a controller in the trucking industry. So that's what he says here. He's I don't know if he passed away. Did he pass away?
Jackie Mason.
Yeah. I mean, he said some things which were definitely over the line, but he was funny. He was funny.
I went to the show once. We enjoyed it.
He was so, I mean, I'll probably be canceled if I tell you, but I thought he was so funny. One time, he was definitely inappropriate, but he knew how to encapsulate. He knew how to get to the bottom of a Jewish psyche. He definitely knew how to do that. Yes, Jill, you had a question?
I thought that shepherds they were not recognized as, that wasn't a good profession.
Shepherds, well, in Egypt, that's what it's, what?
But Joseph still said, my family.
That's what Joseph says to Pharaoh. Here, we'll read the verse and we'll try to explain it. Joseph says Rashi points that out in two verses, so we'll get to that. Joseph says, and Rashi reads it, that Joseph says to his brothers, and I'll say to Pharaoh, Seth, it's so good to see you. It's the Seth bonus, chapter 46, verse 32. Oh, I thought you said you weren't sure about Wednesday.
No, Thursday.
Oh.
I mean, no,
Oh.
this was my regular step.
Okay,
Schedule's all changed. I'll just keep you posted.
Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
He says, Vanashim roetzon, and the men who are shepherds, I'll say to Pharaoh that my men are shepherds, because they're men of the flock. And they brought their sheep and their cattle with them. Now, when Pharaoh calls you, and Pharaoh says to you, what do? You have to say, Anshe Mikneayu. You have to say we're men of cattle. Avadecha, your servants are minurenu adata, from our youth until now. Gamanachnu gamavoseinu. Also us, also our fathers. Bavor teshvu beretz Goshen, so that you live in the land of Goshen, because so to avat mitzrayim kol roed zoned, because it's an abomination for Egyptians to have shepherds. So he says we need to arrange that we get to live in our own ghetto. We want to rearrange our own. We don't want to live with everybody else. We don't want to live. Why? He doesn't say, but presumably they wanted to maintain their identity.
It's interesting that hundreds of years later, around 400 BC, on elephant time, where there was a big Jewish
Yeah,
community and a temple.
yeah,
One of the two temples outside of Jerusalem,
yeah,
that it was sacked by the locals
yeah.
because of the sacrifice
Of animals. Interesting. Yeah, the Talmud refers.
it's an accurate depiction.
The Talmud refers in at least two places. In one place, it refers to the temple in Egypt, which was set up by the high priest's brother. There's two references that I remember to that in the Talmud. And in another place, the Talmud refers to the giant synagogue in Alexandria, which was so great that the people they couldn't hear it. They had to tell everybody how to respond to the blessings by flags.
There wasn't a temple.
Well, it's not clear what they had there, and
Traditional.
Right.
First, the temple in Elephantine regarded this is the real thing, sacrifice.
well, that's the one that was set up by the high priest's brother.
Yeah.
They had a fight. The Talmud alludes to a fight over who would be the real Kohen Gadol. So one of them ran away to Egypt. That's the old story. So
Start his own shop.
basically, even when the Beit HaMikdash was around, there were two Kohen Gadols. So the verse says in verse 34, "Ba'avor teshvu be'eretz Goshen," so that you can settle in the land of Goshen. V'hitzricha lachem, and it's necessary for you. She eretz mirah, it's a land of pasture. Ukishetomru, and when you say and when you tell Pharaoh, she'ein b'kiyim b'melacha acheres, when you tell Pharaoh that you're not good at any other work, yachikena me'alav v'yoshivim shem, he'll put you far away from him. Why does Joseph not want his brothers next to Pharaoh? And he says, "Ki to'avat mitzrayim kol roed," and this is what Yafa was alluding to. If shame lahem elut, because they don't like shepherds, because the sheep are an Egyptian, are a pagan deity. But it's very unclear why Joseph wanted to do this. It doesn't say why, but it hints to the fact that Joseph, even though he was Egyptian, was not. He says there's an abomination. We're going to do the dirty work that nobody else wants to do. Yeah,
Maybe he just didn't want to hear him.
that's also possible.
And in
That's
last week's parsha, they sat separately because again, that it was toeva for them to sit with the Jews.
Right. They couldn't eat the food that Jews prepared. Joseph is really the paradigm of what happened to the Jews in so many countries in Jewish history, that the Jew was trusted by the ruler to be his number two, to be his assistant, because he was the outsider. They lived separately. They had a relationship directly with the king, which worked out great as long as the king was in control, or as long as you were in the good graces of the king. But then it worked out great until it didn't, and then you were in big trouble. So that the Jews were basically expelled from every country in Northern Europe, and it's an old story.
It's like reverse Mavusha. They won't eat a meal, they'll
Yeah.
prepare, and
For sure.
now we won't let wine, by a non-Jew in that way.
There is
It's like we're copying that.
well, it's the same goal. The goal is to keep the people separate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not, I mean, in India, they have the whole caste system. These are relics of this world, which kind of is not officially around anymore, but unofficially, it's still a segregated world, probably. So the verse tells us, chapter 47, verse 1. Vayavo Yosef. I mean, so chapter 47, verse 1. I mean, let me just pause the recording for a second. I mean, so the verse tells us, Vayavo Yosef, Joseph came, Vayagelu Paro, and Joseph speaks to Paro. Let's look closely at his language here. Vayomer Avi V'achai V'tzonam V'karam Kol Asher Lahem. My father, my brothers, their sheep and their cattle, and everything that belongs to them. Bo Be'eretz Canaan. They came from the land of Canaan. V'nam Be'eretz Goshen. They're in the land of Goshen. Now, here's where it starts getting dicey. From the, we'll see what Rashi says. From the end of his brothers, from part of his brothers, Lakach Hamishan Hashim. He took only 5 men. Vayatzigem Ufnei Paro. And he brought them in front of Paro. Look at what Rashi says. Mina Pachutim Shebahem Gvura. He took the weakest. He didn't take the commandos. He didn't take the guys who are the fighters. He took the weakest. She'ein nirim giburim. He doesn't want to take the ones that look mighty. Shem yiro some giburim. Because if Paro thought they were mighty, Ya'asel taman shemochama. I'll draft them. I'll make them soldiers. Ve'elahim. These are the ones he took. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Issachar, Binyamin. He dressed them up in looking like accountants. You know, he didn't want them to be drafted. Otan shelo kafal Moshe shmotam. These are the ones who Moshe did not bless. When he blessed them, he didn't double their names. Aval shemota giburim, but the ones who were doubled, the names of the warriors, Moshe doubled. As it states, Zotu Yudah, Shema Hashem Kol Yudah, Lagad Amar Baruch Marchiv Gad, Naftali Amar Naftali, Dan Amar Dan, V'chein Zvulun, V'chein Asher. So, okay, Rashi says this is the language of Bereshit Rabbah, which is the Agadah of the land of Israel. So basically, Yosef was, Rashi says this is from the Jerusalem Talmud. Talmud Bavli Shalanu, but in the Babylonian Talmud, Matzina we find She'osan Shekafal Moshe Shmotam Hayu Achalashim. That is just the opposite. He took the other ones were the weak ones. Osan Evilifnei Paro, and he brought the weak ones before Paro. The Yehuda and Judah Shehuchbal Shemo, whose name was repeated. Lochbal Mishum Chalashut was not because he was weak. Ella Tam Yesh, but there were a different reason, as it states in Baba Kama. That because Judah, okay, there's a reason there. The first mention of Judah was a prayer by Moshe that Judah's banishment be rescinded, and the second means he was accepted. But so basically, there's an argument which are the weakest, but very clearly, Joseph tries to present his brothers to Pharaoh as weak, not a threat, saying we're the weakest. Yeah. Okay. Vayomer Paro Achav, and Paro says to his brothers, Mama Sechem, what's your occupation? Vayomru al Paro, and they said to Paro, Roeit son avadecha. Each of your servants is a shepherd. Gam anachnu gam avosenu. We're shepherds. Also us, also our fathers. Vayomer al Paro, and they said to Paro, Agur be'eretz banu. We came to the land. There's no flock for our sheep. Asher avadecha ki kaved arav be'eretz Canaan. V'ata yeshvu na avadecha be'eretz Goshen. Let us dwell, your servants, in the land of Goshen. Vayomer Paro al Yosef. Paro says to Joseph, Avicha v'achecha ba'u elecha. Your father and your brothers have come to you. Eretz Mitzrayim lefanecha. The land of Egypt is before you. B'meitav haaretz, from the best of the land, Hosheves avicha, you shall settle your land. V'esachecha yeshvu be'eretz Goshen, let your brothers dwell in the land of Goshen. V'im yadata, v'im yesh bam anshe chayil, if you know, and if there are mighty warriors, v'samtem sari miknal asherli, make them my shepherds. So even though it was an abomination for Egypt, somebody needed to be. Now, Anchechal doesn't mean mighty warriors. It says capable people. Rashi says, "Bekim boom nason l'rot son." Yeah, I can use a good shepherd. It's a tough job. Nobody wants to do it.
And there's two reasons. First of all, David told Saul that he had to fight off the lion and the bear. So you do have to be strong in one way or another. And second of all, the reason why the Pharaoh still had sheep is because of the milk and the wool. They didn't eat the meat, but they still had, uses other than that. Obviously, like
And also, probably they had some meat on the side.
Fish.
You know, come on. I mean, what?
Fish
And from.
and frogs.
Yeah, they had some stuff, you know. The king always took care of himself, you know, it's different. Anyway, this is the whole story. The Jews, in medieval Christendom, they weren't allowed to be moneylenders, the Christians. So who were the moneylenders? The Jews. And the Jews were the bankers. They took the jobs. Vayavei Yosef and Joseph brought Vayavei Yosef as Yaakov Aviv, and Yosef came to Jacob his father. Yamideu Lefnei Paro, and he stood in before Pharaoh. Vayevarach Yaakov es Paro. So Yosef brought his father Jacob, and he stood in before Paro, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Right? What was the blessing? Rashi says, "He Sheilat Shalom." This is the greeting of. This is the blessing of peace. Kederach kol hanirim lefnei malachim. That's a prakim. This is how everybody who appears before kings is supposed to make this blessing. Saluder in Old French. Saluder, to greet, like salute. Salutatory.
Salutary.
Salutatory.
Salutatory.
Yeah, because salute, to salute someone.
Right.
Yeah.
Controversial.
Controversial.
Wait. Here's what the footnote says. In modern French, saluer, to salute or to greet. Rashi uses the same Old French word in chapter 33, verse 11. The word has its origins in the Latin salutare, to greet, which in turn is associated with the Latin salu, health.
Same in Italian. Salute.
Okay. Are you trying to say something, Seth?
No,
Oh.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Vayomer Paro al Yaakov, and Paro says to Jacob, Kama yemei shnei chayecha. How old are you, basically? How many are the days of the years of your life? Vayomer Yaakov al Paro. So Yaakov says to Paro, he says to him, Yemei Shnei Migurai, the days of the years of my sojourning are Shloshim u'ma'at shana, 130 years. U'ma'at v'ra'im hayu Yemei Shnei Chayai. Few and bad are the years of my life. Lo isigu et Yemei Shnei Chayei avotai b'mei migureihem. I have not reached the days of the years of my fathers when in their sojourns. So yeah, it's true. Yaakov was very young compared to his fathers. So Yaakov at this point was 130 years. Shnei Megurai, Yemei Geruti, the days of my transience. Kol Yemei Hayiti Ba'aretz, V'lo Hisigu B'tova. I never accomplished the good. So Jacob, so sad. He says, I had a tough life. Imagine this, by the way. Just think about this for a second. Yaakov Avinu, the patriarch, the name of the Jewish people, were called Bnei Yisrael. He had a hard life. So he's the one who had the biggest impact of anybody in the world. We're called the sons of Israel. Every synagogue is named after him. Children of Israel, sons of Israel, Bnei Yisrael. And yet he's on the downer. Yeah.
No, if go ahead, Deborah.
You mean Shoshana or Rabbi Yosef? Who's?
I thought I heard. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt anybody. Go ahead. I'll say as you then. Nothing.
Oh, okay.
I think that it's and I don't know if this is what you're saying. I think he's saying that he looked older than his age would suggest because of his hard life that he's had. I think it's his appearance is saying, I looked old because I've had this hard life. That's what he's saying. His physical appearance looked old, not so much that he really was,
Hello,
He
Reb.
does say that his years were few and unfavorable. So, telling you, he's not a happy soul.
He does complain, and I think the rabbis talk about whether or not he's punished for that. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask. But it says that he lived eventually 147 years. His father lived to 180, so that's for each word in the question and the answer, he lost 1 year. But I was sure that
Well,
Rashi,
where does it say it?
I don't know, but it comes out to be 33 words. So verse 8 and verse 9. The question, and I think the Gemara says, why is Yaakov punished for the question of the Pharaoh? And I think that his answer, if I remember, maybe it was Rav Tzuriel who told us, basically that Yaakov is also punished for Pharaoh's question because obviously he looked so miserable that it brought the Pharaoh to ask him such a direct question. You don't usually ask somebody how old they are. Like,
I'm trying to remember if that question is ever asked in the Torah. How old are you? It's almost never asked. I don't remember another time where that question is asked. So he clearly was, it's very beautiful explanations that Yaakov was demonstrating some aspect which was problematic. All right, we'll just do the last verse and then we'll stop and we'll call it, and we'll stop at seventh Aliyah and we'll dive in. Vayivarach Yaakov es Paro, and so Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Vayetze milufnei Paro, and he departed from before Pharaoh. What was the blessing that he gave? Vayivarach Yaakov. Rashi says, Kederach kol haniftarim. He blessed him in the manner of everybody who departs milufnei sarim, from the presence of the nobleman. Mivarchim osam, they bless them. V'notlim reshut, and they take permission to leave. Ma bracha bercha, what blessing did he bless them? So before you leave a king, you're supposed to give them a blessing. What blessing did he bless? Did he bless Jacob with? He blessed him sheyala nilus l'ragel, that the Nile should rise to his feet. The fishein eretz Mitzrayim shotem make shamim. In Egypt, they don't drink rainwater. Ella, I guess it doesn't rain in Egypt. Ella Nilusola, the Nile rises umashke and irrigates it. Yaakov Elach, from the blessing of Jacob onward, Hayaparo Baal Nilus, Pharaoh would come to the Nile, V'hu Olel Kroto, and then the Nile would come up to greet him, umashke to arts, and would irrigate the land. So this is the idea that Pharaoh was almost divine in the sense that he would come to the Nile and it would rise up. And this was attributed to Jacob's bracha to him. Again, a very powerful scene, the scene of Jacob encountering Pharaoh.
Does Jacob prostrate himself before Pharaoh? Because isn't that what you do when you meet a king? Does there's anything to talk about whether or not he bowed down to Pharaoh when just like you would with a formal greeting at the time?
That's a very interesting question because it doesn't say here that he bowed down, but it says Joseph does earlier and Abraham does. But I'm trying to remember if later on it says that they bowed down. That's a very good question. Very, very point. He blessed him almost like an equal. Very, very good point. I had not thought of. Okay, let's stop here so we can dive in. Rashi Koach.